Chapter 5. Zeon, Screw-You, and a handful of other Daleks, all PTSD sufferers, the sub-commander noted, had made a tactical retreat to the research center. The Cybermen had made no sign of infiltrating it, perhaps due to the lack of humans there. Upon entering the center, they found themselves face to face with Lore and Stork. Lore held a staff-like weapon, which had been concealed in her wings. She pointed it at the approaching Daleks for a moment.
"General, if you would be so kind as to not attack us,"
Zeon remarked. "I wasn't sure if you were Cybermen," Lore explained, lowering the staff.
"Did you hear any footsteps?"
Zeon retorted. "No," Lore admitted. Screw-You eyed the two.
"Feel free to put a few dents in the sub-commander, General. I, for one, think it would add character,"
Screw-You said jovially.
"Please ignore Screw-You,"
Zeon said flatly.
"Do you have a plan, General?"
"Not as such. We are up against 3 Cybermen. We could potentially take them on in an all-out assault, but I don't like our chances. We need to be clever about this," Lore replied.
"What I'd like to know is how they worked out how to send the deactivation signal,"
Screw-You interrupted.
"I did not know about it, so it's not common knowledge."
Lore looked sheepish. Stork looked at her and glided in front of her, almost protectively. "I think that's my fault," she confessed. "A Dalek was losing it out on perimeter duty, and I used a trick Ryuk taught me to calm him down. I thought it was the right thing, but the Cybermen must have been watching." There was silence for a moment.
"So, this is your fault,"
Screw-You remarked. Stork glided towards him threateningly.
"Do not disrespect Screw-You,"
Stork said confrontationally. "Stork, please. It's okay. He's right," Lore said sadly.
"There is no use wallowing over it now. The Cybermen have taken all the slave workers to the main complex. I do not know what they're doing with them, but it's not likely to be good. We need a plan to counter them,"
Zeon said boldly.
"I think I can help you with that, Sub-Commander,"
interrupted another Dalek's voice. They all turned to see a science Dalek in the corner, who had been hidden under a white sheet the whole time.
"Bothin,"
Zeon said, recognizing the science Dalek.
"what are you doing here?"
"I was working here, as is my duty, but then I heard the commotion. I may have a viable plan to quell the cyber incursion,"
Bothin said.
"Bothin here is our best and brightest. Bothin, this is General Lore. She is in command,"
Zeon said.
"and doing a fine job of it,"
Muttered Screw-You. Stork turned his eye stalk and glared at him. Lore approached Bothin. "What's your plan, Bothin?" Lore asked. Bothin gestured to the chest piece of a Cyberman that had been seen earlier.
"Fight fire with fire,"
Suggested Bothin.
"They utilized our weakness through signal manipulation. Why should we not do the same?"
"You mean send a signal through one and use it to destroy them all?" Lore contemplated.
"Or better yet, a computer virus."
Bothin said with glee.
"Theoretically, the components in this piece of dead Cyberman should still be operational. I just need to crack their firewalls. And how long will that take?"
Asked Zeon. Bothin considered.
"About 500 rels, give or take 100.
He said finally.
"That is not long.
Said Screw-You.
We could just hide out here until it is ready, and then activate it."
We have been lucky so far,
Remarked Bothin.
but at any point the Cybermen could begin searching this area, and furthermore, the Cybermen's defenses will be able to intercept the virus. Unless...
"We distract them," Lore concluded.
Precisely.
"Lead a frontal assault and buy you time. If we focus our firepower to one Cyberman at a time, we could do some real damage," Lore said.
Then it is decided. Prepare to move out, troops. The fate of the 9th Conquest Army hangs in the balance. Let us make this the day the Daleks defeated the Cybermen.
Zeon declared.
"Well, I am inspired."
Screw-You said sarcastically.
I have something else that may help, General.
Bothin said. He pointed his manipulator arm to a cyber gun in a case.
A cyber gun should be effective against their own kind. The design is logical, as is to be expected. Just point and fire.
"All right then," Lore said. "Let's do this."
Give the order, General.
Zeon prompted. Lore nodded. "9th Conquest Army, advance and exterminate," she cried. Lore retrieved the gun from the case, and they all filed out. All except for Bothin, who remained behind, with Screw-You, who had selflessly decided to guard him from any attacks. As Lore, Zeon, Stork, and the remaining Daleks made their advance through the facility, they found no Cybermen. The occasional Cybermite skittered past and was gone, and there were a couple of dormant Daleks on the way, which Lore quickly awoke and explained the situation to. As they reached the main complex, things became more complicated. Law peered around the corner of the entrance and saw a fascinating but horrific sight. There were 3 Cybermen as expected, 2 in peak condition, and the third which was damaged, from Dalek firepower it seemed. However, the Cybermen had constructed a metal honeycomb-like structure, and the human slaves were all secreted into it. They were all visible, but changed. They were being transformed right before her eyes, converted into Cybermen. The speed with which they had created this conversion chamber, and the swiftness of the processing was as impressive as it was terrifying. Where once had been only 3 Cybermen, would soon be nearly 50. Given how much trouble an entire conquest army had had with less than 20, it was no exaggeration to state that this force would be a threat to the Empire. Law turned to her Dalek comrades and whispered, "There are 3 entrances, right? Divide into 2 groups and cover those doors, and prepare to storm inside on my command," she said quietly, but precisely. The Daleks looked like they were about to chorus the usual "we obey," but Law put her finger to her lips. Instead, their lights flashed 3 times in unison, as if mouthing it. Then they turned and departed. Law heard one Cyberman say,
"Processing at 75% and rising. Soon we will be able to use the Dalek vessels to leave this world and find other humans to convert into Cybermen." "Agreed. Once we have conquered worlds with large populations, we will be ready to challenge both the Eden Alliance and the Dalek Empire. The long sleep is ended. The cyber race will rise anew."
Law watched in fascination at the conversation. The third Cyberman, the damaged one, turned to its fellows.
"We are being observed."
Law watched in surprise as the 3 Cybermen turned towards her. She looked down at her feet and saw, to no surprise, a cybermite. She angrily stomped on it, destroying it. She grasped her staff tightly and entered the room calmly. The Cybermen eyed her coldly. "All right, you caught me. I know it's rude to spy, but it's also rude to enter one's home uninvited and convert their slaves," Law said casually.
"We have liberated your slaves. When they are as we are, they will not be our inferiors. They will be our equals. You are not a Dalek. What stake do you have in the fate of this world?"
the middle Cyberman asked. "I am General Law of the 9th Conquest Army. I was created by the Daleks, and I serve their cause."
"What cause? Destruction, spreading fear and death. These are wasteful."
"We bring order to a chaotic universe," Law retorted.
"You are wrong. The Cybermen want to unite all races. We wish to be allies with all, even you. You shall be dissected and removed of your enhancements. We detect human genetic material. Therefore, you are compatible. You will be like us."
"No, I won't. And to tell you the truth, I'm bored." "Now!" Law cried. Less than a rel later, the Daleks attacked. Zeon leading one group, Stork the other. Law pulled the cyber gun out and began firing. The gun had a kick, and aiming it was more difficult than she had anticipated. But a single blast knocked one Cyberman, the damaged one, off of its feet. It stood up and began to return fire. Law took refuge behind a piece of equipment, and the Dalek groups attacked the other 2 Cybermen.
"You cannot defeat us,"
the damaged Cyberman stated. "You sure about that?" questioned Law. "You're damaged, and your 2 friends can only last so long," the damaged Cyberman considered.
"Your logic is correct. Begin emergency activation sequence,"
the Cyberman said. The second Cyberman ceased attacking the Daleks and turned to a console. It pressed a single button, and a 3-tone signal began to bleep out. As it did, Law leapt out and fired at the damaged Cyberman. She hit it right in the chest unit. The unit cracked, and liquid of a green hue spilled out along with what looked like mechanical organs. The Cyberman cried out and clutched its lifeblood, but eventually it toppled. 1 down, she thought. 2 to go. But as she said this, the tone increased, and the partially converted humans began to file out of their conversion machine.
"All Daleks concentrate fire on the left Cyberman,"
ordered Zeon. The Daleks complied, and soon the Cyberman was on its knees, the barrage of Dalek guns overcoming it. As they did this, Law fired at the other Cyberman, which stomped towards her. Screw it, she thought, grasped her staff, and leapt at the Cyberman. She swung it around hard and it clanged off of its armour. The Cyberman's neck tilted at an odd angle, but Law was then distracted. She noticed that one of the converted slaves nearest her was the one she had spoken with earlier. Ella, her name had been, she thought. Now she was more machine than person, her body covered in cybernetic components. Her face was still human, but the handle-like attachments had been grafted to her head, and her face was as emotionless as a Cyberman. The Cyberman she was fighting capitalized on Law's distraction, and grasped its metal fist around her neck. It squeezed.
Cyber units,
It called out.
destroy all Daleks, tear them apart.
The cyber slaves turned and advanced towards the Daleks.
Defend yourselves!
Ordered Xeon. Stork elevated off of the ground and flew towards Law, all the while firing on the Cyberman as it throttled her. The Cyberman struck at Stork, whose anti-gravity drive failed. The Dalek fell to the floor, lying on its side. But Stork had accomplished his goal. The Cyberman was distracted. Law dropped her staff and pressed the cybergun with both hands against the Cyberman's chest. She fired, then again, and again. The Cyberman's chest unit sparked and crackled. It gasped and choked, releasing her neck. Law dropped the gun, picking up her staff, and she thrust it with all her might into the Cyberman's chest. It plunged straight through, spilling more green liquid. The Cyberman's head exploded, and Law recoiled at the bright light. All 3 Cybermen had been dealt with, but the partially converted slaves were still advancing. 2 grabbed at Xeon and began to pull at his casing. As Law began to fly towards him to save him, the slaves clutched at their headpieces and opened their mouths in silent screams of agony. One by one, they fell, unmoving. "Bothin! He did it!" called out Law in relief and triumph.
It would appear so, General. I would like to say it was a foregone conclusion, but it was touch and go for a moment there.
Xeon looked at the red handprint on Law's neck.
Are you injured?
"I'm fine," Law said.
That is good to hear, General.
Said a voice by her feet. She looked down in surprise. "Stork!" she said with concern. She carefully lifted him and placed him back on his feet, so to speak. "Are you damaged?" she asked.
Systems are at acceptable margins, General.
Stork replied. "That's good to know. You know, I think saving my life is becoming a habit."
Just doing my duty.
Stork said dismissively. Law looked around at the destruction the virus was causing. Cybermites lay dying on the ground. The cyber conversion chamber was sparking and deconstructing itself, falling into useless slabs of metal, and the slaves were all dead. "Well, we won. But at what cost?" she said with a slight twinge of sadness. Epilogue. Law stood before the assembled Daleks of the 9th Conquest Army, outside of their base on Caldice. Xeon stood next to her. "The Golden Emperor has asked for a full report, which I shall give him immediately," Law said.
Regarding the way in which the Cybermen worked out how to use the signal manipulation, I do not recall how, and it is probably best you do not mention it to the Emperor,
Xeon said. "Duly noted, Sub-Commander." "Thank you," Law replied.
I do not require thanks, General. The 9th survives. All surviving Daleks are revived, and the replacement mutants are being fitted into new travel machines as we speak. Once the Emperor sends us more slaves, we will be back on track.
Xeon concluded. "Better still, the 9th Conquest Army has finally earned its name," Law said. She looked with pride at her army, her force to command, the Daleks who had followed her orders and stood by her now. Stork, Bothin, even Screw-You, she felt sure they would accomplish great things together. "You truly are the Cyber Stompers."
No,
Xeon said stiffly.
we are.
In the Cyber Observatory, the Cyber Leader was not happy. But neither was it unhappy. It lacked the qualities to be either. It had managed to sever its connection to the Cybermen on Caldice before the Dalek virus had infected its systems. The Daleks had bested them on this occasion. They had been delayed, but not defeated. Even now, the Cyber Leader was preparing the next phase of its plan. Their downfall on this occasion had come from underestimating the Daleks, and using a world with limited human materials was a hindrance. Next time, the Cybermen would attack from a place of strength. The leader sent out an activation signal to a far-off world, and the revival began in another tomb.
"We will survive,"
the leader said with machine clarity. The Silver Tide was written and read by Phil Owen. Characters created by Andrew Wagstaff. Second Empire created by Mechmaster.